Moses, the mighty man of God, we talked about last week. Talked about how, of course, he was born, and we read that tonight again to remind us of where he came from. Last week we talked about what a great warrior he was and how he led those men and led those people during those times, the former slaves. He molded them into a great army, led them victoriously, if you remember. For 40 years he led these people. We talked about last week that he was a diplomat and a statesman. He could speak of peace, but he could pronounce war. And he led the nation out of servitude to make them a respected nation, to be feared. And he did that in a short time, 40 years in those things. And he knew how to win friends. He knew how to influence people. I think those are great characteristics for us today. When you think about that, he knew how to win friends. And he knew how to influence people. You know, I think we need to ask ourselves that, don't we? Can we win friends? Can we truly win a friend? Are we a friendly person? I teach our young people in the school system, especially the group I work with. Of course, Miss Teresa got me a mug today. It said, "I teach kids. I'm not scared of anything." That's truth. Especially when you teach the ones I teach. But anyway, I teach them every day. You got to be a friend to gain a friend. And you can't go around beating people up and expect to have a friend. You can't go around not being friendly and expect to gain a friend or win a friend. So Moses was a friendly man who could win friends, but he could do that, and he could influence people. And I think that's two important things that we need to look at. Are we winning friends, and can we influence people? Are we influencing people in our lives? That's a good question for each of us. But not only was he a diplomat and a statesman, Moses was a great writer. We know that he has written the first 5 books of the Bible. We talked about that as well. Some of the greatest works of history that ever penned. He's graphic in those things, and from the first chapter of creation all the way through, and how he penned those things and was guided by God in those things as well. He also was a great orator. He was able to speak. At the very beginning, if you remember, he was not. He did not have the confidence in the beginning. That's an excuse he gave God. He said, I can't talk well. God took that excuse away, didn't he? He said, I'm going to give somebody to talk for you. Well, guess what? Moses, through that time frame and all the stuff that he did and the talking that he had to do, he became a great orator. Now, you think about us. How many of you are now doing things that you never thought you'd ever do? Think about that. Some of you now are preaching. And I remember years ago where you was first coming in or whatever, and we was trying to pull you to get you to do an opening prayer or just count or wait on the Lord's table. You know, as they say sometimes, look at me now. That's how we need to look at that. He was a great orator. He started out where he couldn't do a lot of things. But then through the help of God and through the help of people around him, guess what he did? He became a mighty man of God. And that's my challenge to all of you today and tonight. Especially to our men. Can we be a mighty man of God today? Yes, we can. Can we be a mighty woman of God? Yes, we can. But the first thing we've got to do is want to do it. That's the first thing. We got to have the desire to become like this man that we're talking about tonight. The mighty man of God, Moses. A lot of people say, well, I'll never be a Moses. Well, you may not lead people through the desert for 40 years or more. You may not ever walk between two walls of water. But there's a whole lot of things you can do between here and the end and during that time and become a mighty man of God. I think you've got a good start on it here. Like I said, I've watched many of you grow and doing things now that I know you thought you'd never do. And a lot of times we don't know what talents people will develop. But the thing is we need to be developing them. And we need to be working for God. So tonight, in the next few moments, Moses was from a great background. When you go back and look in Exodus chapter 2 and verses 1 through 10, you see the background of Moses. And it could partially account for his greatness. He had the great faith for Amram and Jochebed had their son to instruct the way of God during those tender, formative years of his life. He had the background of great faith. Now, many of us in here tonight, we have a great background of faith. Brother Gossett, I know your dad preached here with a preacher and a faithful Christian, and your mom, and that was a great background. Some of the rest of you have a great background of history in the church. But you know what? The further we go along in life, there's a lot of people who don't have that. There's a lot of people sitting in this number tonight who didn't have that great faith background. Now, I had a little bit of both. I had a great mother and had a great dad. Just didn't always choose to do the right things. But I had faith in my background. You've had great faiths in your background. And we can't sit here tonight and not give that the credit that it needs. We've talked about this morning how we need to share that with our children in our Bible class. And we talked about the rope this morning. What part of the rope were you? And whoever cleaned up my mess, thank you. I don't know who done that. When I come back up here for my Bible, it was all cleaned up. And I was like, well, somebody cleaned it up. I pulled strand by strand of that rope out this morning and dropped it off in the floor as the rope began to unravel because of sin. But we've talked about that. A great background. But you know what? Those of you who sit here tonight who didn't have that great background, that can be changed for your children. You know that? Yeah. From this point on, you can say they're going to have a great background of faith because of me and their mother. May not have had it in their grandparents. May not have had it in the family. But somewhere, somebody has to change the way things go in their life, in that family. I had to do that on the Scoggins side. I had to change that. Somebody had to break the cycle. And I chose to do that. Wasn't easy. Still ain't easy. Wasn't easy for Moses. I mean, all the things he went through, but he had a great faith background, didn't he? So anyway, he was instructed by his parents. But you know that when he was found in the bulrushes and he was taken back to his mother, don't you know his mother told him daily, you are a child of God. You are a child of God. You're not an Egyptian. You are a child of God. You are a Christian. You are, or not Christian, but you are the life of Christ, and you are God, rather. He created you, and you're Israel, and you're all these things. She was giving him those positive things, wasn't it? How many times do we give those positive things to our children? How many times have you told your child or children lately how proud you are of them? Micah and I had a conversation yesterday morning. It was just me and him sitting in the living room and drinking coffee, and he was getting ready to go about his day and to start some things in town, this, that, and other. And I was able to have a conversation with him and tell him how proud we were of the young man that he had become. And we need to have those conversations with our children. And we need to tell them what a good Christian person they are. Now, if they're living it, okay? Don't be lying to them. But if they're living it, we need to be doing that. But he had a great background, Moses did. The young adult life of Moses was spent in the courts of Pharaoh of Egypt. Now, he may gain insight into leadership. But you know, that background was nothing compared to the power he derived through faith. Hebrews 11:24-25, by faith Moses, when he was grown up, if you remember, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. We know that verse well. Choosing rather to share ill treatment with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasure of sin for a season. That was all brought about by the background of faith that he had. Continuing on, Moses had a great ambition. He was endued with three qualities that make for greatness. And those apply to us today. He had talent, he had energy, and he had ambition. And that's something that every one of us can have. You've got a talent. But the question is, are you using that talent? You got energy. Now you may not have, you may be older and you don't have the energy that you always had. I'm feeling that now in my 50s. But all of us has got the energy. They even got energy drinks. If you ain't got energy, buy you an energy drink. Buy you one of them things. That'll pump you up. I've seen that in action. We took a group of kids of Fred Hartman, Bobby, your brother, was one of them. They called me down to his room one night and said, he's eating some energy gum and drinking an energy drink. He was bouncing off walls. He was bouncing off walls. Well, he was always active anyway. But they'll give you the energy. They will give you the energy. But he had that. He had the talent. He had the ambition. He led people. He caused them to have confidence in him. He had the talent to influence his enemies. He purposed in his heart to use this talent for the services of God. And I ask you that question tonight. Have you purposed in your heart to use the talent that God gave you to serve him? You see, that's the question we have to ask ourselves. We're looking at all these qualities of Moses. Diplomat, statesman, great writer, orator, a warrior, fighter for God. Had a great background. And he had ambition. He led Israel until he was 120 years old. And he was content to use this energy in the service of God and to help others. He had a driving ambition. But he was first of all ambitious to do the will of God. You know, we wish, and according to those three respects, we wish that every young boy could learn from Moses. These things will still make for greatness, and God can still use us in his service if we develop those things. I'm going to tell you, most in our society today, most young men do not have a male figure to look up in their life. And if they have one, it's not a godly one. And you know, that concerns me because we're seeing it in the educational system right now. We've got young men, we're not downing you tonight, but we got young men who, some of them, who don't even know if they're a man or not. That's sad. God made you a man or he made you a girl. There's no in between. There's no in between. And God made man to be the leader in society, in the home. Because he made the young lady, the weaker vessel. She's weaker in strength, she's weaker in emotions, in all those things. Not downgrading the woman. But God had it figured out to be the right thing, the right way. And the young men that are here tonight, please, please be a young man. Be something that you can look back on and say, boy, I'm glad I heard that. I'm glad I'm a young man. I'm glad I've learned how to work. I've learned how to be respectful. I've learned how to be a man. And we're lacking that in society today. Most of them who don't have fathers, they're not getting any instruction on how to be a nice young man. They're not getting any instruction on how to treat a young lady. You know, those conversations that my son and I have had. You know, I was sneaking around when Adrian and Drew first dated me. I was making sure, I was checking if he'd open the door for her or not. Got a picture of it, matter of fact. I was driving by. I said, well, check that one off. He's taking care of my daughter. But to be young men, and young ladies, look for those young men like that. Look for those qualities in a young man. Just as we're talking about Moses tonight. He had that ambition. And I'm going to tell you what, young ladies, if your young man ain't doing nothing but sitting in mama's or grandma's basement playing games all day, he ain't got much ambition. Okay? I'm just going to be honest with you. Now, I love playing games, don't get me wrong. But if he's sitting down there all day, he ain't getting out and going to work, and he ain't doing nothing, helping around the house and taking off the garbage and doing all this kind of stuff, he ain't got no ambition. Same thing on the other side. Young men, if them young ladies ain't doing anything, all they want to do is stay on their phones, you might need to give them a shot of energy drink. I don't know. But I'm going to tell you, you don't want that in a relationship. Because if they won't work for themselves, they're sure not going to work for God. And let me tell you something else why I'm on that. The Bible says if you don't work, you don't eat. Contrary to what our society says. We're living in a society, as well as you know, as I know, that I'll just draw a check. Now, don't get me wrong. There are people who need checks. If it wasn't for the check and for food stamps, I would have starved to death when I was a kid. But I'm going to tell you, I wanted to be more than that. I didn't want to live off the government. I wanted to be a young man. I wanted to be a man. I want to be a young man that one day some lady would appreciate. You know, the Bible says for you young ladies to respect, especially those who are married, respect the man in the home. But I want to tell you, young men, you got to give them something to respect first. And if you ain't giving them anything to respect, that's kind of hard to do. But Moses had ambition. And they will make you, he made him great, and they'll make you great. He had endurance. After all said and done, Moses was known for his endurance. Through every conceivable kind of obstacle, by faith, it says, that Moses endured. And God said that of this man. As now, when Moses was very, very meek above all the men that were upon the face of the earth, Numbers 12 and verse 3. He had endurance. Meekness does not mean that you're a coward. Gentleness does not mean you're a coward. Men. We can be meek. We can be gentle. Remember a while ago I said that he could speak peace, but he also could speak war. That's where you got to be. Moses was patient. It did not mean he could not act decisively. Moses was tempered by his faith in God. It was by faith that he endured all the things and the things that he persevered. You know, there's a lot of things today that I see in society, especially with our men and women, not just men, but men and women, is nobody ever finishes anything. They start out. I don't know how many kids that when we graduate them out of high school here in this county and other counties as well, not even Macon County, they start out, but guess what? They don't finish. That's why we have so many divorces in our society today, because we've not been taught to finish anything. Parents have allowed, in our society, have allowed their children to start things and quit things so many times in their life that they don't know how to finish anything. You know, and that's an attribute in the Lord's church that we need, is to finish the faith. Paul said, he said, I fought the good fight, I've kept the faith. All the way to the end. Why do we have so many drops out in high school? Because folks don't finish things. Why do we have so many drop out of the Lord's church? Because folks don't finish anything. I'll start it. Sounds good right now. Sounds great. But when things get a little hard, we don't have that endurance, just like Moses. Moses had a great faith. By faith, again, he forsook Egypt and not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible, Hebrews 11:27. By faith, Moses could see, visualize, and comprehend something of the worth of the blessings that awaited in a life of faithfulness. Moses set his eyes on the distant future, and they were never blinded by the immediate present. His gaze of his eyes swept above the temporal things of this world. That's a good thing for us, isn't it? We shouldn't focus on the temporal things of this world. And we should be able to develop a great, strong faith in God. You know, the question that I want to end this thought on tonight is the great reward. Was Moses rewarded for his faithfulness? Did his faith have its reward? Yes, Moses was rewarded throughout his life. His faith made Jehovah near, and his power was a constant source of comfort to Moses. He saw the works of God manifest through all that he did, and he labored with the realization through all he did, as God was fashioning a mighty nation through him. Moses relied upon the everlasting arms of God, that he could feel their strength beneath him. Moses viewed the promised land, if you remember, a great eye of faith. He died outside the promised land. He had his reward. He got to view it, didn't he? After 15 centuries rolled by, Moses appeared on earth again. You remember that day? And he taught with Jesus and Elijah on the Mount of Transfiguration. Talked to them about the Lord's approaching death, didn't he? But look into the future beyond this life. You know, when that song says, when the saints go marching in, go marching home, they'll be singing. They'll be singing what? The song of Moses. The servant of God and the song of the Lamb. Revelation 15:3. Resounding as a serenade in the streets of glory. Was Moses rewarded for his faith? Yes. Paul's instructions, and we're going to close with this thought, the Christian carries with it the same great things. In 2 Corinthians 4 and verse 18, while we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. And a few verses later, Paul wrote this, same words. We walk by faith and not by sight. 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 7. We need to be looking into Jesus, the author of our and perfecter of our faith. Hebrews 12:2. This faith, like Moses, will cause you and I to endure to the end. That's the message that I want to leave in this sermon tonight and for this congregation of people. It'll be my last official sermon. I'll still get to talk to you on Wednesday night in Bible class. But remember this, what I just read. While we look not at the things which are seen, but the things that are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal. They pass away, folks. But the things which are not seen are eternal. We walk by faith and not by sight. May I encourage you, for the years and years and years to come, till the Lord shall come back, or till we shall leave this world, continue to walk by faith and not by sight. Don't get caught up on the things of this old world. Let God make a mighty man or a mighty woman out of you. You've got to let him. He's the sculptor, we're the clay. Let him mold you. I will continue to let him mold me. I've got a lot of learning. I told Brother Jimmy, and I was talking this afternoon, I said, it's been a great time here. I said, I've matured a whole lot here. He said, I hope we all have. I said, you're right. And I will continue, Lord's willing, to mature. But again, we walk by faith and not by sight. These things here are temporal. Keep your eyes on the things that are eternal. And we'll all meet in heaven one day. That's my hope and my prayer for each of you. Tonight, maybe you need to become a Christian. We encourage you to do that. Maybe you need to come home. Repent of those sins. Let God start molding you once again. Maybe you've let the world mold you and turn you into something you know is not what you need to be. But let God mold you. Let God take control once again. Tonight, whatever your need may be, please come. Together we stand as we sing.